My name is Christopher Penn, co-founder of TrustInsights.ai, confirming that Una Radisic has permission to use my name, my role, my company in her dissertation. And feel free to repurpose any of this media as well. I will be posting it as well also on my YouTube channel. We have a list here of 11 questions concerning personalization and artificial intelligence in retail. So let's dig into these. Question 1, how do you think machine learning and AI are changing or might change the shopping experience and customer expectations? The shopping experience itself. So artificial intelligence really does three things. It does acceleration, accuracy, and automation, the three A's of AI. And so this means that machines do stuff better, faster, and cheaper than we do. So from the customer experience, from the shopping experience, things like recommendation engines, we already see the impact of these. Consumers being able to get true personalized recommendations for purchases. A big thing will be proactive recommendations. So based on data that we have about a customer, knowing that a customer is also likely to purchase these things, and machines, Amazon, of course, is probably the leading example of this, being able to make recommendations in advance, sort of knowing what you want before you get a chance to even think about it. It says, hey, you probably like these things based on everything else that we know about you. We see this certainly with Facebook with its newsfeed trying to suggest content. We see it on YouTube proactively suggesting, here's some videos that you might want to watch, even if they're not necessarily the kind of videos we've watched in the past, just because the recommendation engines understand that. I would strongly expect things like natural language processing to be a major part of the customer experience going forward. One of the things that is just so revolutionary, what's happened in the last 6 months, and this is early 2019 as we record this, is tremendous advances in natural language processing and natural language generation, from libraries like BERT and Elmo to Facebook's Laser, which is zero-shot translation, to IBM's Project Debater, which is which did real-time interaction and true natural language generation in a coherent way in a debate. All those things are things where consumers can have unique individual interactions with a brand, with the brand's products or services through AI, and feel like they're getting what they want, and only for them, uniquely for them, as opposed to sort of the way marketers have done things with personas. Now it's truly one-to-one personalization, one-to-one recommendation, and one-to-one assessment of what a customer wants. Finally, of course, one of the I would say the obvious things to look at is from a customer expectation and really from a shopping analysis, is the analytics around shopping are already getting significantly better for marketers to understand here's what's driving purchases, here's what's driving recommendations, here's what's driving all these different things. So important and very likely to be something that we'll continue to see going forward. Question 2. What kind of impact do you think big data and artificial intelligence will have on the future of fashion retail environment and customer experience? We're actually seeing some really cool stuff happening on the augmented reality and AI front, where consumers can stand in front of a kiosk and try on different clothes, different makeup, different looks, different hair colors. There are apps for your phone that allow you to do this, that use obviously image recognition, visual recognition from various AI libraries. And it's amazing in that these things allow us to see what we look like. I mean, I could see what I look like with purple hair, which actually isn't all that much different than we currently do. But giving customers the ability to truly try on what's happening in advance and understand how the decisions will impact them. Another really good example in the augmented reality realm, again using AI and image recognition, is home improvement stores allowing you to hold up your smartphone and visually assess, like, this is what this new sofa would look like in your living room, or this is how this painting would look. I recommended to a friend recently that they were on to do some yard layouts and work in their yard, and they were able to use an AR app to drop in placeholders for like a bench and a sidewalk and gravel and this type of plant, that type of plant, and visualize with their project in advance of them actually digging a spade into the ground. So expectations by the consumer will be greater, that companies of any kind be able to provide these capabilities. And ideally, in the long run, that investment will pay off for companies because you'll have things like fewer returns. You'll have people who are willing to be a little more avant-garde with their fashion choices because they don't have to buy the thing to see what they look like in the thing. They could actually try it on virtually and say, yep, I like that look, or yeah, I don't like that look. And so satisfaction levels should increase as well. When you increase satisfaction, when you decrease returns, when you decrease complaints, of course, loyalty will increase, return purchases and upsells will increase, especially if recommendation engines are built into these things where it's like, hey, that shirt looks great on you. Why don't you pair it with this set of earrings or with this necklace or with this watch? Very obviously ways to upsell a customer in the moment while they are visualizing their new identity. Such an incredibly powerful set of tools. Question 3, what will be the main challenges of data analysis, ML, and AI implementation? The number one challenge is always data. It is always, is your data clean? Trust Insights actually has a whole framework called the 6C framework of great data for AI. And it is it clean? Is it compatible? Is it well chosen? Is it comprehensive? Is it credible? Is it compatible? Is it calculable? And so all of these aspects of data are really important. The ability to have clean data, to have it be timely, and especially to be able to build models from it and detect bias in it. These are all the important aspects that a lot of companies, in their rush to try to do an AI implementation, don't give enough thought to. And there can be serious consequences to that. Something real simple in automotive, what's happening with autonomous vehicles is that autonomous vehicles have been trained to recognize pedestrians and things, but they struggle with certain colors of skin. So an autonomous vehicle might be more likely to not recognize a pedestrian if they are a certain ethnicity. And so this is something that obviously anyone who's working in self-driving cars would need to, it has literal life or death consequences. The same thing is true in skin cancer treatment. A lot of image recognition has been trained on people with very light skin. And so the software does not do as well with people with darker skin. Recognizing bias in our data. When we talk about fashion specifically, being able to make recommendations, be able to reduce biases. You need a lot of things like perturbation testing to validate that you are not loading biased data into a system that's making biased fashion recommendations. It's a fine line, because if you think about it, if I'm Asian, if I am always being recommended certain fashion types that are stereotypically Asian, is that good business or is that bias? Well, something like perturbation testing would randomize some of what I see. So I wouldn't see entirely, Japanese or Korean patterns or fabrics. I would, 5% of the time I would see an African pattern or a Russian pattern or something that would help me understand, there are more choices that are built on different types of interests. So data cleanliness, model selection, and bias detection are some of the main challenges, and some of the ones that will be the most impactful if in a bad way if companies don't get it right. Number 4, how can retailers ensure that customers' personal data is analyzed ethically and responsibly? Well, there's a whole framework for this. The International Standards Organization, the ISO organization, has decades worth of compliance and governance requirements for the processing of data, the storage of data, the securing of data. And one of the significant risks in marketing is that IT people are and have been really good at adhering to those specs and reducing risk. Marketers, not so much. Marketers are new, relatively speaking, to the world of data and compliance around that data. So it's one of the greater challenges that they have to face and that they have to resolve. There's a spec that we use at Trust Insights, ISO 38500-2015, the 2015 implementation of IT governance of data. And that incorporates things like, do you have security policies and processes and procedures? Do you have an encryption standard? Do you have policies for disaster recovery? Do you have policies for business continuity? Do you have policies against malware and hacks? All of these things that need to be taken into consideration. And one of the biggest mistakes a marketer can do is to try and, in haste to get to market, bypass proven procedures for securing data. because even if you get fired from your job, you're probably not going to be held personally liable for $1 billion data breach. And so we want to make sure that companies are implementing and adhering to these procedures as best as possible. Around ethics is something that has to be baked in to a company at all levels of its culture. It's not something that is uniquely a marketing problem. Marketing has to take ethics into account, but ethics itself has to be something that is embraced from the very highest office all the way down. And so there are some really good books and resources. Hilary Mason's book, Ethics in Data Science, which is free on Amazon, is required reading for anyone doing any kind of data project. But fundamentally, we have to always consider as many different guardrails as possible when it comes to how we spec out a project. So there's, again, back to that ISO framework, there's the business strategy, there's the marketing strategy, there is the balance sheet, there is operations, there is risk management, and then there is change management and the human component. And that human component is really important. Facebook, if you look at the way Facebook has decided to make its algorithms work, about how Facebook makes choices about what it optimizes for itself. It optimizes to maximize engagement of users, to get them to spend time on site, to get them to do stuff for the purposes of obviously showing them more ads and keeping people in the Facebook ecosystem. Well, if that's your only objective and you tell a machine optimize for that objective and nothing else, there's no other ethical considerations, the machines will do exactly as you tell them to do, and that can mean some significant deleterious consequences on society. Facebook's machine learning realized, if you make people angry and afraid all the time, they're engaged. Well, this propagates fake news, this propagates election tampering, this propagates all sorts of negative consequences that no one in Facebook's engineering group clearly gave much thought to. And so as for us as marketers, we have to account for those possibilities. How could this be misused? How could this data be misused? How could this model be corrupted? How could malicious actors corrupt our models intentionally? If we're doing things in fashion, how could someone introduce patterns or ideas or designs that were intentionally but subtly racist? All those things. The important part is that people have to plan up front to do worst case scenario planning and build safeguards into every system we do that can take that into account and protect against it. We can't foresee everything, but we have to, and we will be held accountable for taking all reasonable precautions with consumer data. Question 5, how can retailers address privacy concerns appropriately? This is also encompassed within that ISO framework, and privacy concerns fundamentally boil down to what data you're collecting, how well is it secured, and what are you using it for? And those are sort of the three major buckets that we have to take into account. When we look at what's happening in the world, particularly with the General Data Protection Regulation, the GDPR of the EU, the California Consumer Privacy Act, governments and legislators are sort of intervening on behalf of consumers. And so one of the challenges for retailers is they have to be as proactive as possible on self-regulating. Otherwise, governments will do it for them, and it will be disadvantageous to retailers. In some cases, significantly, if they don't, if all companies do not self-regulate. You'd rather take like a smaller revenue hit than a really big one. And as many companies found out in 2018, GDPR imposed a substantial cost on many companies because they were not set up to address privacy concerns in an appropriate way. One of the things to look at for companies is if you look across the landscape of everybody who is in every country that's creating privacy regulations, what is the strictest standard, and then can you comply with that standard so that anything that's subsequent to that or lesser than that, you're automatically in compliance with. If you are fully GDPR compliant within a country that does not require GDPR, like the United States, then you're going to be compliant with pretty much everything else. You'll be at that gold standard already. So that's an important thing for marketers to take into account. Question 6, do you think that increased user autonomy could resolve the ethical issues such as privacy and control? So giving users more control over their data is a good idea. There's no reason not to, because the more control and autonomy you give a user, the less likely they are to go the binary route of just delete my data. They can request under GDPR, forget me, delete me, rather than giving them more controls to say, like, here's how I want you to use my information. Here's what you may not use my information for. The more choice you give someone up front, within reason, the less likely they are to take very dramatic actions on the back end. And retailers need to be paying attention to this. They need to be paying attention within their customer service inbox, within their call centers. How often are you tracking, like, a user complaining about the amount of data they're collecting, or they feel like their privacy is being intruded upon? If you don't have processes in place to account for that, you run the risk of the user just deleting themselves out of the system. Or worst possible scenario would be them pressing a lawsuit against you. And that's something you don't want for sure. Question 7. Some propose that artificial emotional intelligence could be used as a tool for emotional manipulation of consumers in the future. What is your opinion on that? Machines in the present day still don't understand emotion. They understand the patterns in data that are associated with emotions, but they don't fundamentally understand emotion. And so when we think about how AI would work with dealing with emotion, it really is dealing on that pattern recognition. Can you manipulate consumers? And should you? It depends. It depends on your ethics. It depends on your values, and it depends on, in many cases, does the technology even work? So clearly, we know for something that has massive data like Facebook, Facebook has proven unethically. They've even done emotional studies without consent from users, which is a massive research violation, that they can manipulate people's emotions. Should you do so? Maybe. It depends on what your ethical safeguards are. If you say we will do some emotional manipulation and try to make people happier, and define the outcomes and define the safeguards you've put in place, then I don't see that as any different than what we do in advertising or marketing, where we try to manipulate emotions at a human level. Photos of puppies and babies and all these different things, and the way nonprofits market themselves. All of that is emotional manipulation of consumers. It's being done by humans. And arguably it's being done by humans inconsistently because when you have a human doing it, not only do you have the corporate policies of whether or not you're going to manipulate emotions, but you have individual personal biases. I believe that artificial intelligence could make the processes a bit more standardized and reduce the potential for those individual biases that could seriously clog up the way that we market, or even just contextual misunderstandings. When I was working at Sony Electronics a number of years ago, the Japanese office would attempt to make advertisements for the American market, and they were not necessarily linguistically fluent in English, nor did they understand some of the ways language could be misinterpreted. There was this one series, a digital camera that had a battery, and the product name was called the Stamina Battery series, because it was supposed to have batteries that lasted longer, so you could operate your digital camera for longer periods of time. And Tokyo sent over this appalling ad campaign that literally the tagline was, "When you are at the climax of your shooting, you need stamina." Well, in American English, that has a number of inappropriate for work innuendos built into it, and Sony did not realize this. Fortunately, the campaign never saw the light of day, because it would have been seriously embarrassing. But that was a case where human emotional intelligence and a lack of understanding of cultural context got them into a great deal of trouble. If you're training artificial intelligence and you're training it on the local data set, and you're training it with local information, things that are native to a specific culture, you may actually do better than a human who is trying to make something for a market that they don't understand. There's a distinct possibility that someone trying to build a campaign using AI, using natural language processing, if they're using that local dialect, the AI may have a better data source than someone from a distant office. So there's a couple different ways that you could do that. Question 8. What do you think are the main factors driving the need for personalization? Number 1, consumers expect it. Consumers expect personalization because they expect things to be made for them. They expect something that is just for them. And again, a lot of that is being driven by companies like Facebook and Amazon and Google, where we get recommendations from their deep learning networks that say, hey, this is probably what you like, and they're right more often than they are wrong. The other thing is that the personalization is differentiation. If I go to a retailer and I get the same thing everybody else gets, there's no that doesn't impact me as a consumer in a positive way. I feel like I am being treated as, just a number. If I get something that is uniquely mine and that nobody else gets, that makes me feel a little bit special, especially if there's any kind of status or badge value to it, sort of that intangible value. Being able to get something like that is just for me, it can be uplifting from an emotional perspective for consumer. So consumers are expecting that personalization, that uniqueness, that one-to-one interaction with a company in ways that are possible now that were not previously, because there's only so many ways you can machine something, or that you can write something if you're a human. But if you're a machine, you can do true personalization and keep in memory every single interaction you've had with every single customer. Question 9, how do retailers benefit from investing in personalization? Well, if a customer feels like they have a true one-to-one relationship with you, then it is all about retention and upsell. You retain the customer for longer, you can upsell them more stuff, especially if you are delivering a product or service where the personalization is so good that it embeds themselves in their lives and they can't do without it. Look at how Google has infiltrated the home. First it was just the search engine and then advertising, and now there are smart home devices, there are smart thermostats, there are all these different ways that are tied into the ecosystem of the Google ecosystem that you literally cannot do without them in your home if you've committed to that infrastructure. If you ever want to have a really unpleasant experience, try signing yourself out of the Google ecosystem and then going about daily life. You will find an astonishing number of places where that interaction, that relationship impacts you in ways you wouldn't expect from your smart assistant. You may not even be able to open the front door to your house if you're using like smart locks and all these things. So retailers, if they're clever and they're smart, will be looking for more and more ways to tie the personalization they generate into the products themselves, and building that long-lasting relationship, that retention, that customer retention, and that upsell. Because as you figure out better what a customer wants, you can sell them more stuff. And if your personalization is really good, not only will you sell them more stuff, they'll be happier because they will feel like not only are you looking out for them, but you're guessing correctly what they want and what they need in their lives. Question 10. Some argue that Generation Z expects personalization from all retailers. Do you think that personalization could become the norm? It already is the norm. If a retailer lacks it, that retailer is perceived, for good or ill, as being behind the times. Amazon sets the standard in retail, period. If Amazon can do it, then and demonstrates proof of concept, then every other retailer is held to that bar, right? If Netflix does it, if Spotify does it, everybody else is expected to meet that bar. So when I sign into an app, I expect that app to behave like Netflix. I expect it to remember me. I expect it to pick up where I left off. I expect it to make recommendations that are in line with what I've already done. It's not just Generation Z either. It's not that behavior of high expectations is across all categories. When we have a positive customer experience that goes above and beyond, we expect future customer experiences to mirror that. Garrett Gunderson has a great quote. He says, "A luxury once experienced becomes a necessity." And the same is true in customer experience. Once you experience great customer service, that is the bar that is set, and you must consistently meet that, if not exceed it, in all the other interactions. Which means that if I, as a customer, have a great experience with Amazon, every other retailer had better match my experience with Amazon. If they don't, I'm going to shop at Amazon, because there's probably a good chance that whatever it is I'm trying to buy, I can get on Amazon anyway. And so that's the bar that's set. And we as marketers have to understand that we have to meet the bar that is set by the biggest competitors, the competitors for mindshare, the competitors for the same 24 hours a day. These smart devices that we have, the phones and this and that, we don't really understand that mentally, emotionally. We understand mentally, we don't understand emotionally that what we get from the Amazon experience is going to be different than what we get from like the Home Depot experience or the JCPenney experience. We expect all the experiences to be equally good because we've had that experience and we know it's possible to get this thing. Final question, question 11. When observing machine learning and AI, which stage would you say each of these is at on the Gartner hype cycle? Well, that's a tough question to answer. And here's why. Machine learning and AI are professions. They're academic disciplines. There are so many sub areas in each section that putting the blanket technology on there somewhere is very difficult. AI, in particular, as a discipline, as a field, is something like 90 years old. It is well into the plateau of productivity in many cases for mature technologies like time series forecasting or regression analysis. That stuff was super easy and was conquered long ago. What we're seeing now is, in the current AI summer, if you will, there's winters and summers of these technologies, is some of the cutting edge stuff. So deep learning, reinforcement learning, a lot of automated machine learning, all of that stuff is still very much in the peak of inflated expectations. But the mature stuff has been out for a long, long time. Where I think the question is probably more pointed is what is the consumer experience? And right now, the consumer experience with artificial intelligence is very much the period of inflated expectations. And the same is true for marketers. A lot of marketers are not quantitatively inclined. A lot of marketers are not people who are mathematically savvy, who don't understand computers and code at the level they would need to in order to understand the deployment of a technology, the implications of maintaining it, and so on and so forth. And so for them, there is still very much this peak of inflated expectations and expecting that AI is somehow kind of magic that just does stuff for them, which is completely untrue. AI is mathematics, pure and simple, and it is based on the data we give it. So you put bad data in, you're going to get bad AI out. And that's where, even now, in early implementations of many technologies, if a company does not have a strong data science team at work, a strong AI background, or really solid vendors that have a lot of experience, they are headed to or in that trough of disillusionment because the implementations were not sound. Generally speaking, AI up front is going to cost you a lot of money and a lot of time to implement. It's like any other enterprise system. CRM and ERP and all the other three-letter phrases, their benefit is in the long term. If you do it right, you make money in the long term. It's not a quick hit. It's not a quick win. AI is exactly the same. It is a set of technologies. It is a set of processes and procedures that require significant effort and upfront investment in order to make them pay off over the long term. And so for the expectations of the marketer, yeah, they're highly inflated right now. And for the consumer as well. Consumers, again, have that expectation from Amazon and Google and Facebook that these systems do appear magic to them. And they expect all retailers, all people in fashion, all people in every industry to meet the bar that Amazon has set. So that is all 11 questions. Please feel free to, again, I give permission to use this material. However, just make sure that it is properly attributed. And I'll be publishing it on the Trust Insights YouTube channel as well. So thanks for watching. Talk to you soon.
Want help solving your company's data, analytics, and digital marketing problems? Visit trustinsights.ai today and let us know how we can help you.